This is our report for the year 2025 on geopolitics. I wish to begin it. The year 2025 did not introduce a new world order. It confirmed that the old one is over. What governed global affairs for nearly 3 decades after the Cold War, rules, institutions, consensus, and predictability continue to weaken. In its place, something older and more instinctive took over. Power, leverage, pressure, endurance. 2025 was not about who is right, it was about who can sustain pressure longer. The end of the post Cold War illusion. Since the early 1990s, the world functioned on a belief the globalization would integrate nations, that institutions would restrain conflict, that economics would tame geopolitics. By 2025, this belief had collapsed completely. The United Nations remained active but increasingly symbolic. The World Trade Organization struggled to enforce rules. International law existed, but enforcement depended on power, not principle. The idea that rules protect the weak no longer held. In 2025, rules followed power and not the other way around. The United States remained the most powerful nation in the world in 2025, militarily, financially, technologically. But it's not but its role changed. Instead of managing the entire global system, Washington moved towards selective engagement. Key characteristics of US behavior in 2025 focused on core interests, not global policy. Prioritized Indo-Pacific over Europe and the Middle East. Used economic pressure and technology controls more than troops. The US still led, but it no longer carried the system on its shoulders. This created power vacuums, especially in regions where American presence once stabilized outcomes. China's strategy in 2025 was rather expansionist war, not retreat. It was controlled assertiveness. Beijing avoided direct military conflict, especially over Taiwan, but applied pressure across multiple fronts. Military signaling without escalation, economic leverage over trade partners, diplomatic influence in the global south, technology self-reliance programs accelerating. China's leadership under Xi Jinping showed patience. The message was clear. We do not need war to weaken the existing order. Time is on our side. China did not rush, it waited. By 2025, Russia was no longer fighting to expand influence. It was fighting to not be pushed out of relevance. Ukraine war hardened Russia's worldview permanently. Key realities in 2025. Russia accepted long-term confrontation with the West. Economic isolation became normalized. Military endurance mattered more than victory. Under Vladimir Putin, Russia framed survival itself as success. The Russian state adjusted its economy, society, and military for permanent tension, not peace. This shift signaled something critical. Russia no longer expected reintegration into the Western system. Europe entered 2025 economically strained, politically divided, and strategically dependent. While nations like Germany, France, and Poland increased defense spending, Europe still faced core weaknesses: dependence on US security guarantees, internal political fragmentation, migration pressures, energy vulnerability despite diversification. Europe spoke the language of values but acted under the constraints of reality. The European Union remained intact, but its strategic confidence declined. Europe increasingly reacted to global events instead of shaping them. Perhaps the most underreported shift of 2025 was not in Washington, Beijing, or Moscow, but across Africa, Latin America, and parts of Asia. Countries avoided ideological alignment. Instead, they practiced strategic flexibility, engaging China economically, maintaining ties with the US, accepting Russian energy or defense links were useful. This is not non alignment of morality, it was non alignment of survival. The global south stopped believing that one system would save them. They diversified risk instead. By the end of 2025, one truth stood out. The world no longer moved towards order, it moved towards managed instability. Wars did not end, they froze. Institutions did not disappear, they weakened. Power did not concentrate, it fragmented. This was not chaos, it was controlled disorder. And nations that understood this reality adapted. Those that clung to old assumptions struggled. 2025 did not shock the world, it educated it. The lesson was simple, uncomfortable, and irreversible. The age of guarantees is over. The age of endurance has begun. In earlier centuries, wars had endings. Treaties were signed. Borders were redrawn. Victors declared peace. By 2025, that model no longer applies. Modern wars no longer aim for victory, they aim for exhaustion. The most important shift in warfare is this: it is easier to start a war than to end one. Ending a war now requires political consensus, economic recovery, social stability, international guarantees. Achieving all four simultaneously is rare. So conflicts continue not because leaders want war, but because ending war has become structurally difficult. By 2025, the Ukraine war was no longer about rapid advances or dramatic offensives. offensives. It became a war of attrition. Key characteristics: front lines moved slowly, sometimes meters, not kilometers. Artillery, drones, and surveillance dominated. Logistics mattered more than heroics. Human endurance became as important as weapons. Neither side accepted decisive victory. The objective shifted to outlast the other. This is why the war persisted. Ukraine is not unique. By 2025, the world contained multiple frozen and semi frozen conflicts: Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Palestine, Yemen, Syria, parts of Africa. These wars remained active enough to kill but controlled enough to avoid escalation into global war. They exist in a gray zone, too intensive to resolve, too risky to expand. Despite rising tensions, major powers avoided full scale war because total war now carries unacceptable risks: nuclear escalation, economic collapse, global supply chain disruption, domestic political instability. Modern leaders fight below the threshold. They apply pressure without triggering catastrophe. By 2025, drones, satellites, cyber tools, and AI reshaped conflict. What mattered most? Visibility. Almost nothing stays hidden. Precision. Strikes are targeted, not massive. Denial. Disrupting systems instead of destroying cities. War became less about shock and more about continuous exposure. This favors patience, not aggression. Earlier wars were brutal but shorter. Modern wars are longer, psychologically draining, socially corrosive. Populations adapt to war as background reality. This normalization makes ending conflict harder. People learn to live within war instead of demanding peace. Wars in 2025 were not mistakes, they were tools used to apply pressure, signal resolve, drain adversaries, shape negotiations. Victory became optional. Persistence became essential. In 2025, wars did not race for glory. They continued because stopping them required more strength than continuing them. This is the paradox of modern conflict. By 2025, the most powerful weapons in the world were not bombs or tanks. They were interest rates, sanctions, supply chains, currency access. Wars could now be fought without firing a shot. We, for 3 decades, the world believed in one idea: trade creates peace. By 2025, that belief collapsed. Trade was no longer neutral. It became selective, strategic, and political. Countries stopped asking, is this efficient? They started asking, is this safe? Is this controllable? Can it be weaponized against us? Sanctions replaced medieval seizures. Instead of surrounding cities, countries surrounded of economies. Sanctions targeted banking systems, energy exports, technology access, insurance, and shipping. The goal was not instant collapse. The goal was slow pressure. Sanctions are often misunderstood. They do not immediately overthrow governments. Instead, they do not immediately overthrow governments, instantly stop wars. They do weaken long-term capacity, reduce strategic options, increase internal strain. This is why sanctioned states adapt instead of surrendering. By 2025, sanctioned economies learn to reroute trade, use intermediaries, develop substitutes, rely on informal networks. Sanctions became a contest of endurance, not morality. One of the biggest shifts was supply chain warfare. Key choice, key choke moment, key choke points matter more than factories. Example: semiconductors, rare earth minerals, energy transport routes, shipping influence. Control over inputs became more powerful than control over output. Whoever controlled chips, energy, shipping, controlled geopolitics. By 2025, money itself was political. Key realities: dollar dominance still mattered, but alternatives slowly expanded. Financial access became conditional. Freezing reserves, blocking payments, and restricting credit reshaped state behavior. For the first time, nations feared economic isolation more than military defeat. As trust declined, blocs formed. Countries grouped not by ideology but by trade incompatibility, trade compatibility, resources access, resource access, financial safety. Economic alignment mattered as much as military alliances. Neutrality became expensive. Economic warfare has advantages: lower immediate casualties, plausible deniability, domestic political safety, continuous pressure. Leaders could say, "We are not at war," even while inflicting strategic damage. By 2025, wars were fought on three levels: military pressure, economic strangulation, narrative control. Winning any one was not enough. States needed to survive all three. In 2025, nations did not fight to destroy armies, they fought to control systems. And the strongest weapon was not force, but access. For most of the post-Cold War era, the world had one center of gravity. By 2025, that center fractured, not because one power collapsed, but because many powers rose just enough to resist domination. What multipolar really means? Multipolar does not mean equal powers, peaceful balance, shared leadership. Multipolar means multiple centers of influence, overlapping power zones, constant negotiation, and friction. Power is no longer vertical, it is distributed and contested. Why unipolarity could not last? Unipolar systems fail for three reasons: overextension. One power cannot manage every crisis everywhere. Smaller states learn to cooperate against dominance. Global leadership loses credibility over time. By 2025, the world no longer accepted a single referee. The world now functions through power blocks, not empires. Each bloc has core leaders, strategic partners, peripheral participants. No bloc controls everything. Each controls something critical. This is crucial. Power blocks are interest based, not value based. Members disagree, they compete, they even clash, but they remain aligned because leaving costs more than staying. This makes blocs stable but tense. In 2025, leadership looks different. Leaders no longer command, they coordinate. They cannot force obedience. They must offer security, market, technology, stability. Power flows to those who reduce uncertainty for others. Old style spheres are gone. Instead, nations operate in multiple spheres simultaneously. A country can trade with one bloc, but weapons from other depend depend on energy from the third. This flexibility is survival. Rigid alignment is risky. In multipolar systems, big powers compete, small powers adapt, middle powers decide outcomes. They swing balance, they broker deals, they absorb pressure. By 2025, influence mattered more than dominance. Multipolarity reduces total domination but increases const- constant tension. No single war decides everything. No single peace lasts permanently. Instead, continuous negotiation, limited conflict, strategic patience. This is a long game world. The strongest nations are not those with largest armies, the loudest rhetoric, but those that can navigate multiple blocks, stay relevant without provoking, adapt without surrendering. Power now means flexibility with discipline. world did not become multipolar to be fair. It became multipolar because no one could dominate anymore. And in this world, survival belongs to those who understand balance, not bravado. In earlier centuries, power meant land, armies, resources. In 2025, power increasingly means technology, data, control over systems. Technology is not a sector, it is infrastructure. Technology is often spoken of as an industry. This is outdated thinking. In 2025, technology is the nervous system of states, backbone of economies, battlefield of influence. Whoever controls systems controls outcome without firing a shot. Information today decides elections, markets, social stability, diplomatic leverage. Power now lies in shaping narrative, controlling visibility, influencing interpretation. The fight is not over truth versus lies, it is over attention and belief. Unlike land or oil, digital power concentrates fast. A few actors control platforms, standards, algorithms, infrastructure layers. This creates dependence, vulnerability, strategic asymmetry. Small actors can disrupt big powers. Big powers struggle to fully control digital space. By 2025, technology used as pressure, sanctions, access, denial, influence platforms, content flows, control surveillance, data dominance. Instead of blockades, systems are switched off. Instead of invasions, access is denied. The global internet is no longer unified. The world is splitting into different standards, different platforms, different data regimes. This creates digital borders, not visible on maps, but deeply felt in daily life. Artificial intelligence as power multiplier. AI does not replace power, it amplifies existing power. Those with data, computing capacity, skilled talent move faster, decide quicker, and influence wider. AI accelerates military decision cycles, economic forecasting, information operations. Speed itself becomes dominance. In 2025, nations fear not invasion, they fear dependency. Dependency means systems you don't control, platforms you can't replace, data you don't own. Sovereignty now includes digital sovereignty, technological resilience, the human cost of technological power. Technology does not only empower states, it reshapes societies. Consequences include job displacement, social polarization, attention fragmentation. Power is gained externally, but instability grows internally. Managing technology is now governance challenge, not just innovation. Who actually controls the power? Not the loudest states, not the largest armies. The future belongs to those who control critical technologies, set standards early, shape information ecosystems, balance innovation with stability. Power flows to system designers, not system users. Technology does not guarantee dominance, but lack of it guarantees vulnerability. In this era, you don't need to win every war. You just need to control the system everyone relies on. In 2025, power no longer marches in uniforms. It moves silently through code, data, and systems, reshaping the world before anyone notices. Economics, energy, and resources, the real limits of power. Power often looks absolute. Strong armies, advanced technology, loud diplomacy, but every power needs limits. In 2025, those limits are defined by economics, energy, physical resources. This economics is the foundation beneath all power. Every decision, military, diplomatic, technology rests on economics. Economics answers three brutal questions. What can you afford? For how long? At what internal cost? A country may win battles but lose sustainability. That is where empires break. For decades, growth was assumed. In 2025, growth is uneven. Slowdowns are structural. Debt is rising everywhere. Even strong economies face aging populations, productivity limits, inequality pressure. Power today is about managing decline intelligently, not endless expansion. Energy is not just fuel, it's a strategic oxygen. Without energy, militaries don't move, industries don't function, societies destabilize. Energy decisions now shape alliances, conflicts, foreign policy choices. Every energy source creates dependency chains. The shift away from fossil fuels is not smooth. It creates new resource dependencies, new winners and losers, strategic competition over material. Lithium, rare earths, grids, and storage matter as much as oil once did. Energy transition is equal to power transition. Land, water, minerals, food, all are limited. Politics is unlimited in demand. The, this creates permanent tension between consumption and supply, between population growth and resources, between national needs and global systems. Resources, resource stress does not announce itself. It accumulates quietly, then explodes. Food and water as strategic assets. Food security is national security. In 2025, climate variability, supply chain fragility, export controls turn food into leverage. Water scarcity increases internal unrest, regional disputes, migration pressure. Wars of the future may not start over ideology but over survival systems. Sanctions reveal economic vulnerability. Sanctions are tests of resilience. They expose overdependence, weak diversification, structural weaknesses. Some states absorb sanctions, others fracture internally. Sanctions don't destroy instantly, they slowly exhaust. Inequality weakens power from within. Economic strength is not just GDP. Extreme inequality undermines social cohesion, fuels political instability, weakens long term resilience. A state divided internally projects fragility externally. Power erodes from the inside first. The illusion of economic control. Governments don't control economies, they manage expectations, risks, trade offs, markets, demography, technology, and resources often dictate outcomes regardless of political intent. The best leaders manage constraints, they don't deny them. The core truth of the core truth: no country collapses because of ideology alone. They collapse because resources run thin, costs exceed capacity, systems stop sustaining themselves. Economics doesn't make headlines, but it decides history. Societies under pressure, polarization, demographics, and identity of 2025. Why does why states don't collapse first? Societies do. Nations don't fall because of enemies alone. They fall when their societies lose coherence. In 2025, the deepest pressure are not military or economic. They are social and psychological. Why polarization is rising everywhere? How demographics silently reshape power. Why identity conflicts are now strategic threats. Society is the base layer of power. Before government, army, economy, there is society. If society fractures, law weakens, laws weaken, institutions lose legitimacy, power becomes performance. A stable society absorbs shocks. A divided society amplifies them. Polarization is not accidental. Polarization is not random disagreement. It is structural, reinforced by systems, accelerated by technology. Modern societies are divided not just on opinions, but on realities themselves. Different groups now live in different information worlds, different moral frameworks, different emotional climates. Technology amplifies identity over reason. Digital platforms reward emotion over nuance, conflict over consensus, speed over reflection. This transforms political debate into tribal signaling, outrage cycles, permanent mobilization. Identity becomes louder than policy. Demographics shape the future quietly. Demographics don't shout, they accumulate. Key pressure in 2025. Aging population is in developed states. Youth bulges in developing regions. Migration flows crossing cultural boundaries. Demography decides workforce strength, military manpower, social stability, long before elections do. Migration is a social stress test. Migration is not just movement of people, it tests cultural tolerance, economic absorption, political legitimacy. Unmanaged migration creates native resentment, marginalization, political exploitation. Handled poorly, it destabilizes both sides. Earlier eras fought over land, labor, wealth. Now conflicts increasingly center on identity, culture, belonging. Identity conflicts are harder to resolve because they are non-negotiable to those who hold them. Loss of shared narrative weakens nations. Every stable society has a shared story, shared symbols, shared memory. In 2025, narratives are fragmented. History is contested. Symbols divide instead of unite. Without a shared narrative, a nation becomes a geographic space, not a community. Institutions are losing trust. Trust is slow to build and fast to lose. Across societies, media credibility declines. Political institutions face skepticism. Experts are challenged openly. When trust collapses, rumors replace facts, emotions replace judgment, power becomes unstable. Social fatigue is a new phenomenon. Continuous crises create fatigue. Pandemics, wars, inflation, climate stress, they exhaust societies psychologically. Fatigued societies become cynical, resist sacrifice, reject long term planning. This limits how much strain governments can impose. The, a state can survive economic stress, a state can survive military defeat, but a society that no longer believes in itself cannot sustain power. Societal cohesion is the final line of defense. By 2025, the world is no longer asking what is happening. It is asking where thing is going, where this is going. Why scenario thinking matters. Linear thinking fails in complex systems. The world now operates as interconnected, non-linear, shock prone. Scenarios help leaders, states, and societies prepare instead of react, adapt instead of collapse, choose paths instead of drifting. Scenario 1: Manage fragmentation. Core characteristics: no single global leader. Regional power centers stabilize locally. Control competition without total war. What this looks like: US China rivalry continues without direct conflict. Ukraine war freezes or shifts into low intensity phase. Middle East remains volatile but contained. Trade blocs deepen, not global free trade. Implication: the world becomes less efficient but more resilient. Scenario Next scenario: escalatory breakdown, high risk, core characteristics. Miscalculation triggers chain reaction. Local conflicts expand unexpectedly. Institutions fail to contain crisis. Triggers: Taiwan military escalation, NATO Russia direct clash, Middle East multi front war, severe global economic shock. This scenario reshapes borders, alliances, and regimes violently. Scenario 3: Technological reordering. AI, cyber power, surveillance redefine dominance. Information becomes the primary black battlefield. Physical power follows digital advantage. Elections, what changes? Elections influence digitally. Warfare becomes remote and automated. Economies reorganize around data and energy. Implication: states that fail technologically fall behind regardless of ideology. Scenario 4: Societal reassertion. Core characteristics: populations push back against instability, demands for order, identity, and protection rises. Strong state models regain legitimacy. Manifestations: tighter borders, stronger execution power, reduced tolerance for chaos. Freedom versus stability becomes the central debate of the next decade. Scenario 5: Economic realignment. Core characteristics: supply chains regionalized, Re- resource control becomes strategic, energy transition accelerates unevenly. Resource rich, who are the winners? Resource rich nations, manufacturing hubs, energy innovators. Losers, over leveraged economies, import dependent states, debt heavy systems. The most dangerous variable: human error. Technology, institutions, and strategy matter, but human judgment still decides outcomes. Risks include overconfidence, ideological rigidity, misreading adversaries, domestic political pressure. Most disasters are not planned, they are allowed. What does not change? Across all scenarios, geography still matters, demographies, demographics still decide, energy still underpins power, society still precedes state. Trends may accelerate, but fundamentals remain. The central insight of 2025-2030. The next 5 years are not about domination, they are about adaptability, internal coherence, strategic patience. Nations that survive will not be the loudest, they will be the most aligned internally. That's our report for the year 2025 geopolitics. Thank you for tuning in with us. Have a great year ahead for 2026.